you see that tends to derail deals? Like, what are your kind of top deal killers that come across that you see?
Okay, so I would take it from a couple angles. I think overall, the overarching sort of deal breaker is a listing that just doesn't make sense. Where
I'm listening.
people can see, and this is why they need to work with transferable, because you guys are pros at making sure that the listing makes sense. I've been a buyer. I've gotten the packages. So I've kicked the tires multiple times over my life. Once you start to double click on those financials, and you're starting to say, hold on, how does this number match up with that number? And you start doing a couple of ratios, doesn't make sense. Okay, well now I want to dig a little deeper. Now let me understand a little bit more about this operation. How many employees do they have? How long have they been in business? How many, concentration of customers, those type of things. And if I see anything that gives me the answer to that story, I'm going to believe it, even though I just made it up, right? So as the buyer, if you don't give me a good story that is believable, that is straightforward, and is easily traced, I'm going to make it up. I'm going to create a pattern in my head, and I think a lot of times that pattern is not a positive one.
Right.
So I think that's sort of an overarching one that I see. I think the other part of it is, especially most situations you're going to have financing involved and SBA potentially. You have to also realize that nobody's going to go ahead and sign off on the numbers if as we were talking earlier, if you're only showing $25,000 of income. Yeah. And the argument's, but I'm actually bringing in $250. Yeah, that's fantastic.
But I take in cash, and there's other here, and we don't want to. I always tell people the more stories you have to tell, that you're losing value every time we have to tell a story. I want to tell as few stories as possible.
I think that's spot on, and I think that's a great way to summarize it. I think there's one other thing that can come into play. So in our work, we will, as you've kind of I've inferred already, we'll sort of look at it from a priority standpoint on a roadmap of what things can we tackle to make those. There's always going to be more that can be done, right? And so in your listing, you're always saying like ideas for the next person, right? Sure. Here you should consider expanding into this new geography, consider adding another service, those types of things. If there's way more of a story there than what I see and what's already there, now I'm wondering why. Why is the owner selling today? If they're leaving all of that on the table and it's just a matter of 6 months or 12 months of flipping that switch, why? I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I don't believe it at all.
Yeah.
So I want that story of like, what's the next, I forget what you call that in the listing, but the listing of things of like additional opportunity.
Opportunities. Yeah. What should a buyer do that basically the seller wasn't able to or didn't have the time to, or what would they do if they had more time? Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely be through opportunities.
And if those opportunities aren't continuing the story that shows up in the other part of the listing, then I'm like, okay, you're just trying to juice up your sales price. You're just throwing stuff out there, but it doesn't. It's sort of like getting back to the burgers, like, and then, by the way, the next one, instead of just burgers, you could go ahead and do sushi. Well, I think that's an entirely different kitchen, entirely different staff, entirely different clientele. So sushi is food, right?
Right, but you made all this money, all these gross sales, all these expenses, all this profitability is based on burgers.
Right.
And, you and I both live in the world of, it's not about the potential or the what ifs. We base it on the historical data, and then the fact that you can bank on that moving forward if you're running it the same way with the same model.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's tough sometimes. So, kind of one of the things that I was thinking of when you were talking about that is, just red flags, right? The minute there becomes a red flag or a little bit of a chink in the armor, I hate using all these terms, but I can't help it, right? I've worked with too many buyers, too many sellers where, when there's a comfort factor with a buyer, we're going to roll through the process more. When that buyer thinks that maybe it's not 100% everything that they're reading or seeing, or they see a problem here and then that leads over to another problem, like that's not what we want, right? We want as much transparency as possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting dance though, right? Because as you mentioned, you want the story to be right, and if you ever find yourself you're reading a book and you're really into it, and all of a sudden there's a sentence or something that doesn't make sense. Maybe it's a typo,
Yeah.
something, and
Throws you off.
throws you off, and you're awake. Right?
Yeah.
Up until that moment, you were in the flow, and an hour could have gone by and you didn't even know it because you were actually being hypnotized, if you will.
Sure.
You don't want that jarring moment to happen on the buyer side. But what you want is them to be nodding, yes, this makes sense, this makes sense. I understand where this is today, and I have some ideas on where this could go tomorrow. And if they stay in that moment, listen, I think buyers buy because they believe today, and they also themselves believe in some additional things they can do tomorrow. Very few of them are buying a business thinking, I'm just going to occupy that seat, and just because you could do that a lot easier with other kinds of investments, right?
Yeah, so we talk about absentee owners a lot, and one of the things that we want to see, buyers come in as, we want to see them come in with that background. We want to see them come from that industry. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see an HVAC contractor going to buy a sub shop or vice versa, right? I want to see an HVAC guy buying an HVAC company. Now, is it odd that maybe they go and buy a plumber or a roofer or maybe something similar? No, it's not too much of a stretch, but you want to know that they're taking that history and what they know and applying it into the new, and hopefully maybe making it a little bit more efficient, or maybe learning something from it.
Yeah, that's right. The transferability, right? So
everybody gotta talks have about that background.
There's the we're gonna use buzzwords, right?
Throw them out, man. Let's use them all.
The synergies of the deal. There's a deal promise, right? And that's a term you use on the M&A side a lot. In the big deals, and that sort of deal promise usually relies on this notion that we'll add something to what we're buying, and we're going to get a multiplier effect on it, right? And so again, you want to set this seller up in a way that they're seen as that piece of the puzzle. And for a small business, mainstream business, it's not going to be the big financial engineered like mergers of equals and all kinds of spin off this overhead and do that.
Main Street USA is a little different.
This is about somebody walking and saying, I believe this business is something that I myself can run, and I'm already dreaming about what that's going to be like, and I already am thinking to myself, what other things that I could do once I'm in that seat.
And if it's been set up right, and they know they can take it over easily, that's what we're trying to lay out for people, and that's where you're coming in and setting that up more in advance versus somebody who's not prepared, and you're trying to we've signed the paperwork, you're taking it over, and they get together on day one after closing, and the seller doesn't know what to start talking to them about.
I think that's right, and that's where from our seat, what we do is applicable actually in any situation that there's a transition. Yeah. So for instance, I want my daughter to take over the business. Or a key employee. If you do this work the right way, you set them up for success. So, sometimes I'll hear, well, I don't really, I don't want to maximize the value because I'm not looking to sell this outright. Well, you still have a situation where I was talking to somebody earlier this week. They have a rental property business. Right now, they manage 200 different single-family homes, 200 single-family homes. They want to grow it over the next 10 years to 500, and then their dream is that it's a legacy for their kids.
Sure.
First question I asked them, how many kids? 5. So now I know from experience, having started off my career as a financial planner and wealth advisor, and then doing management consulting for longer than I want to say in a recording, only maybe 2 of those kids are going to want to be in that business. Right. So if you go to transition that business to the children, 3 of them say no, they still want to get paid.
Right. So what are those 5 pieces worth?
Correct. So now the scenario, the likely scenario that plays out all the time is you've got highly experienced older generation had built the business over 30 years, no leverage, can do it in their sleep because they do it in their sleep.
Yeah.
and they hand it off to an inexperienced younger generation who has to get debt and leverage in order to pay off the 3 siblings that don't want to be in the business. That's not a recipe for success. So if we can at least get some processes documented, make sure your vendor relationships are solid, make sure that the cash flow is there, and you also have a key person risk that's going to bolt for the exits as soon as they hear about it. It's just it's a better business all around. It may not end up being a classic sale.
And it may not go to the kids at all, right? You know, they may have the plan for that, and we've all seen things happen to where it gets derailed, and all of a sudden we've taken a left-hand turn, none of the kids want it, or maybe there's some health issue, right? Or the kids can't take it over, something's changed, and now we've got to go on the open market. And if you've prepared it, it doesn't matter whether it goes to kids or somebody new.
I love that you brought that up, because the other side of this whole that we're talking about happy path here, unhappy path.
There's a lot of unhappy.
There's a lot of unhappy path,
Yeah.
and I'm throwing a lot of stats your way.
Throw 'em out, man.
Another one is 48% of businesses are going to exit because of a crisis.
Yeah.
It's death, disability, divorce, bad partner, or some other sort of stress that causes it. And those can happen at any time. So yeah, you're 100% right. I'm glad you said that, Chip, because your intention may be, I want to hand this off to my kids in 10 years. That may not happen, and you may not have a choice. So having that business in a position where it can be sold, let's paint the worst case scenario, when something suddenly happens to you and they have to do that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, something like that did happen to my neighbor 2 years ago. It was a very unexpected situation, and the people didn't even know how to get into the computer, right? And there were 3 different LLCs that all had like they were all intertwined with each other. There was an unwinding that had to be done from a business structure standpoint, let alone paying. You had payroll to hit, you had vendors, you had things coming due, and it wasn't set up for that.
Yeah, it becomes difficult, right? So what are a couple of really easy changes that you guys suggest to your clients that are quick, simple, anybody can do it, and once you kind of go through your stuff, you're like, let's say, a tanglement situation like that. That's a little bit more intricate, but what's a couple of simple things that people could do immediately that would sort of kind of increase their value or make a little bit of a change for
I
what
think
they have going on?
one of them that's right away, because I think you'd agree, like the number one thing that derails, like we said earlier, is the financials.
Yeah.
Right. So it's you can't do your books at the kitchen table anymore. Right. And so if you have somebody on your team that is actually a trained bookkeeper and can get a little bit of extra training and help in order to make sure that your chart of accounts and everything is set up properly, or if you need it outsourced, it's worth the money to make sure that you're starting to actually track things in a way that is defensible and clear and logical. Along with that is to start thinking very seriously about, is it really worth trying to save a little bit of income taxes today that's going to destroy your value tomorrow? You remember the multiple thing we started with, right? So if every dollar you put on, you have $1, and I have a choice between expensing that dollar on or not, because it's something like I can do within the rules. I'm not breaking any rules.
Yeah, writing off a car, writing off certain things is done.
And if I have $1 like that, and I decide to write it off, I've saved myself. In the state of Florida, we don't have state income taxes, thank goodness, right? Yeah. But I'm saving myself, 30 cents, 45 cents, right? But if that dollar showed up
on the other side,
on the
bottom, on the lower lines,
and your multiple is a 5x, you're giving up 30, 40 cents today, you're getting $5 tomorrow. That's a mind bender, and that one's a hard one for folks, but I think that's one of those first conversations you have.
But that's why it helps to get it, like, to plan it that 2 or 3 years out, being like, okay, here's the things that you're doing. Okay, I get it. I do the same thing. I've done the same thing.
Absolutely.
We've all done it. We've all kind of, made things a little easier for us from a tax burden, but stop. cut it out, and here's why it's going to pay off for you. And when you start doing that 2 to 3 times number, off that profitability, the lights go off sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to lie to you. Other times, from our standpoint, you still haven't done it. We tell people, listen, you already took that profitability up front. You already took it over the last 2 to 3 years.
That's right.
So we're not going to be able to sell it for the same amount. So no, you're not going to get 900,000. You're going to get 600,000 because you already took
That's
300,000.
That's exactly right. So I'd say that's number one. The number two thing that I think is a quick one to jump to is to just get arms around how you run the business. Not many of us, sit down and obsess about writing out the process itself and the different handoffs of work and how that all happens. You want to actually start to capture that, because once you do that, there's going to be a decent amount of self-diagnosis by going through that exercise.
That's right.
It's sort of like these professional coaches that work for you, like on your personal side, of like keep track of your meals. Figure out what you're eating, and it's an eye opener every time, right? The same thing for
the Weight Watchers points, and when you see it at the end of the day.
I mean, I don't want to market myself as Weight Watchers for businesses. That's
I've done
probably not a winning.
I've done
pitch,
the points,
but
I've analyzed. And
but
then
it is true.
Questioned.
Right? Once you start to actually write out and capture and understand all the things that are happening in your business, then ways to simplify that, ways to automate, and absolutely ways to reallocate the work so that Mary isn't doing the books and emptying the trash and also, calling to scream at your primary supplier.
Yeah, put those processes
for parts,
in
right?
place.
You want division of labor to make sense, and you want folks to be able to do work at their highest value add, right? Like, what are they really good at? Let's give them more of that.
Yeah, Mary's the accountant. She doesn't need to be doing the trash stuff.
Let her be the world-class accountant she actually is, instead of all this other stuff. So I think the second step is then to start to get arms around how that business is actually running on a micro level. And then we've got some ingredients there. Now we've got ways we can match things up.
Yeah, I like it. So listen, let's kind of wrap things up. What's one last kind of point that you could throw out for either yourself or Exit Factor? Just that one little thing you love to tell everybody.
I think folks should really embrace the idea that there's professionals that help out in each part of what you're trying to accomplish. And as we mentioned earlier, and it's a big part of our operating model, the way we structured ourselves, Exit Factor, is that we're going to be that quarterback, so that depending on what that person needs, if it's a bookkeeper referral, we've got those. If it's an insurance person, if it's a lawyer, if it's somebody to sit down and write training manuals for their folks, that have they actually figured out how to identify, hire, train, and retain employees. Whatever it is that's going to help move that dial for them, embrace the idea that it's worth, and you should always do a cost, benefit analysis, right? Or consider the return on that investment. But what we're really expert at is not only working with the business on the business side, but also identifying when those other professionals should be called in to add to this.
We're not always salesmen, right? And that's one of the things I think people struggle with, is that I'm not trying to sell you something most of the time. I'm trying to help you through a process to get you to an end goal.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So again, Chip with Transworld, Ed, how does somebody get a hold of you? How does somebody contact Exit Factor?
Sure.
What's your contact info?
Yeah, well, online's always easy, so exitfactor.com. We are in throughout East Central Florida, but there's actually offices all over the country.
You guys are all over, right?
All over the country. Yeah. The UK just launched last week.
That's cool.
There's another top secret announcement coming up.
Come on, man, this is the perfect time to let something like that out of the bag.
Not my place, but we've got folks that have amazing backgrounds that can help out anybody. So I think you can do the website for us specifically.
Email, phone number?
Email, it's Ed, ED, 2 letters. My parents wanted to make it easy for me to spell. Ed.Dellheim, Dellheim, at exitfactor.com is my email. My phone number is 321-343-6154.
Awesome. Appreciate everybody. Ed, thanks for coming
Thank
on
you
by,
so
man.
much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.